Joe, can you do me a favor? Pull that. Just keep pulling. Oh, you want me to pull? Keep pulling. Keep pulling. So, a couple of weeks ago, I brought some bits and pieces of big enterprise computer junk in here to be decommissioned and taken apart and used for scrap. And one of the points of that was, when I was taking it apart, people were saying, what is this for? What is this gizmo about? And I started talking about it's a tape library. And I got 4 or 5 times the question, tape, what's that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what goes into tape libraries and what the place they've got in our data history. I've been messing with these in one way or another for like 27 years or so. One of the first jobs I had was an admin for the computer science department, and one of the roles I had there was, we called it the dump master, because the program we were using to do the backups of those Unix systems was a program called dump. And so that's my credentials of dealing with tapes. You may have seen like 50s and 60s movies of a computer with these things spinning back and forth. This is one of the earlier forms of mass storage. This is a sidewall from a tape drive. There were 2 of those and a spool in between. When the computer science department got rid of their huge library of stuff, I threw about 2,000 of these off of the 3rd floor window into the dumpster, which was 3 floors below, because that was about 10 times faster than bringing them down the other way. And I took the sidewalls because this is good raw material. But that was a device that was called a 9-track tape. Not an 8-track, a 9-track tape. Not 8-track tapes were an endless loop. 9-track tapes were designed to be 2 different spools that were running across a reading head. Most people, are you familiar with audio tapes, cassette tapes for distribution of music? Everyone? Okay. So it's the same general notion. You have 2 different reels, and there's a source and an uptake reel, and you are running the Mylar tape, which has a series of magnetic domains on it that passed a read and a write head in a fairly precisely controlled manner. That thing was about this thick, and you frequently had to tape all the way to the size of those gaps in the sidewall. And I think that was megabytes. Megabytes of storage on there.
48 is what I remember having, at least one of them.
So when I started working,
They ran out?
what? Oh no. When I started working with the computer science department, we wwere using devices like this, which are very physically similar to a VHS or Betamax tape. That's an 8mm tape, and at that point, they were also used in video, and there were 2.5 gigabytes and 5 gigabyte drives that wrote to media essentially physically similar to this. And there were also these 4mm devices, which were, that's probably better that it's not making that noise anymore. And the 4mm were happening more or less the same time, and they had capacities that kind of overlapped with the 8mm. And then there were other physical devices that were more frequently used for desktop PCs, were called QIC tapes. And all of these have, all of those have 2 reels inside, and you're spinning tape from one reel to the other. But this is a more modern version of that same basic technology. There's one reel inside of this, and the uptake reel is integral with the tape drive itself. This is actually only one generation old. This particular one developed read and write errors, and so it is trash. But this was a 7 terabyte tape, and the current versions of them on the current tape drives can get 12 or 15 terabytes in the same physical form factor. And one of the things that is important about the progress of these tapes is the material engineering behind them. You get much, much thinner material that can still maintain the resilience of the magnetic domains that carry the data, and also be strong enough to simply handle the tensions necessary to move the material past the read and write head quickly enough. Tape drives, while they have a seek time that is very slow compared to what we're accustomed with hard drives, the speed at which they can transmit data is very quick indeed. A single tape drive will do 200 megabytes a second if you happen to want the data that's going to be in front of the tape drive all at once. That's called a serial read and write pattern. And so for things where you are, say, you've got gobs and gobs of MRI data that you want to store all at once, and if you ever want it back, you're going to pull it back all at once. You can think of it analogous to the kind of Glacier stuff on Amazon, and I think they're probably doing some of that in tape. You can read it very, very quickly, but it takes you a long time to get your read-write head to the place where you're ready to begin. So,
how long is that long time?
So when current usage that we're using tapes just like this, or almost just like this, to serve the backup needs of the university, when somebody says, hey, I need to restore a file, there's usually about 2 minutes for the tape library to say, oh, I'm going to go get that tape, and I'm going to put it in the correct tape drive, and then it's going to fast forward, seek to more or less the right place to start reading the data, and that can take another 45 seconds or a minute. So usually about 5 minutes or so from the time that the person says, I want this click, to where you get the first byte back to the client. Now, if it happens that the data they wanted was all pretty close to each other, it starts spooling very, very quickly thereafter. But if the data they want is scattered all over the tape, or perhaps scattered across several tapes, you can have that same couple minute seek time between each area that it's kind of co-located. So that's really what I've got to say about tape. What's where we use it now, where it came from. And I encourage people to come and pull more tape out of this, and then when it's done...
How many meters do you think are in there?
I don't know. The last time I did this to one of them, what I did was I started in my office, took it for 4 turns around my chair, and I walked out across the secured doors and lap around the break room, and then went back, and then went back, and then went back. I was there very late, and I did 10 laps before I ran out of tape. So I haven't done one of this architecture, which is one of the reasons I was like, ooh, here's a good opportunity.
Do you know what was on that pattern?
To a first approximation, yes. There were chunks of backup data in a particular, from a particular server.
Okay.
Where do you get tapes?
You can buy them from Amazon. I mean, it's just another piece of media that you can buy. We tend to buy ours from one of a couple of media distributors, just because we've got purchasing habits.
I got you.
What's the cost per gigabyte?
Cost per gigabyte. So the current version of this model, it's a 3592JC, grossly similar to another tape you might have heard go by called LTO. One of those, the last time we bought them, was $180, and with the most up-to-date drive, you could have written, I think, 15 terabytes to it. So it's reasonably good, and one big reason that you like to store stuff on tape is that it does not take any power to have it just sitting on the shelf. As you're familiar, if you've got a great big hard drive array to store for your NAS server or whatnot, you've got to power that all the time. And that means that you've got ongoing costs that you don't have for just stuff that's sitting on the shelf.
So is you still going to use these or not? Or?
Oh yeah. So.
Yeah, you're going to put that back, right?
Yes, we use them right now in Gainesville. We have about 1,600 of those, a couple petabytes, and we've got another image of approximately the same size in Atlanta to store offsites. There's always, yay! There's always talk about like we're gonna get over tape, but the thing is, there are spots in your kind of cosmology of where you want to store data where it continues to make sense. We're probably gonna be moving to where only archival stuff is sitting there, but we have major research projects that do things like I'm going to keep very high resolution MRIs with maybe time series data, not just a still, but a video. And we need, because of the dictates of the grant or because of the dictates of the VA, we need to keep this data around for the first approximation to forever. And it's not something that you really want to spend watts keeping on a RAID 6 array in 2 different locations so that you are sure that you don't lose the data if a meteor hits one of your data centers. It's a whole lot cheaper to have it on 2 shelves, even if they're shelves which are manned by robots.
So 1,600 tapes?
Last time I checked, about that.
How big is the library?
So you can think of it as a refrigerator, and this is probably the Atlanta version of it. And right now in Gainesville, we've only got 3 refrigerators next to each other worth of size.
Do you have to rotate the tapes and archive?
You don't want, short answer, yes. Rotate the tapes, as in like you want to read them and write them from time to time because everything can just kind of go bad.
You get printing from one layer to the other?
They don't have a whole lot of issue with that, but stuff just physically degrades, and when you care about that a lot when you're thinking, gee, it might be 10 years or 50 years, 75 years retention target is what the current VA data. And so you start to have planning horizons that are like, okay, I need to be able to figure out what I'm going to do to get this across 3 generations of media, or 5 generations, or whatever poor schmuck is going to be working there when I retire is going to need to be able to figure out how to move it across 2 generations of media after he gets there. So it's library level retention thinking, and it's so yes, you have to read it and write it. Some of these things, the media life is actually long enough that it's reasonable to think, I'm going to copy this all off to a whole new generation of media before an individual piece of media is going to go bad.
That was my next question, is you have to maintain the technology over those 75 years to read it.
No. If you've got the right kind of layers in between your client and where the physical data is being stored. For example, the software that we're using centrally at UF is a thing from IBM called Tivoli Storage Manager. And it has a really clear idea of, we've got a database that says where we've got this file. And today, this file is on this tape, 400,000 meters from the end of it, whatever, that's the wrong number. But and in a year, we may have moved it from this tape to that tape, or from this tape to that holocube, or whatever we've got next. And I have gone through 4 generations of tape architecture in the last 20 years.
So you're constantly archiving the different architectures and technologies?
So I start pedantically thinking that's not quite the right word, but we migrate the entire corpus of data from one physical substrate to another physical Yes, yes.
I think it's safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the software provides enough abstraction so that it can go from that operating system to this other radically different operating system without losing the content.
There's some radicalisms that it can't really easily cross, but for example, anything in a kind of Unix that has a Unixy relationship with a disk, yeah, you can read and write stuff. If it does POSIX, it can figure out how to pull stuff off and put it somewhere rational. It is not straightforward to take something from a Windows flavor box and put it on a Unix flavored box because not undoable, but not straightforward.
Is it just a big Indian, little Indian issue?
It's more about low-end opinions about... Okay, we're on the edge of what I can speak about, certainly. But I think it has to do with they don't feel confident about obeying the right permission model and the right low-level permissions on the file system between the architectures. And they've had enough problems with that they say, okay, you need some sort of Windowsy box to do this. A wide variety of Windowsy boxes will work, and especially a more recent one. Yeah, you can pull older data onto it, but put it on a Linux box, they really don't want to do that. It's kind of like saying, how do you restore an Oracle database onto a Unix box? Well, you can say there's files that kind of go in places, but are you really restoring a database? It can be kind of squidgy that way.
I wanted to weigh in about the Amazon Web Services Glacier. I don't think it uses tapes, but what they do is they just power down the facility for 4 hours at a time. That's why it takes you 4 to 6 hours to get your data back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know we've got an increasing variety of hard drive disk arrays that are intended to be individual platters to be turned off and stuff like that. So,
Data.
More? Yes.
I suppose you can use the data while it's migrating.
Use the data while it's
If you're going from one generation to the next, you can still have things accessing the data while it's in the phone.
Absolutely. Yeah, those migration periods. I mean, it's years sometimes.
I was just going to ask, those big aluminum platters, that's good raw material. Has anybody thought of a good use for the tape itself?
Lots of little strips of Mylar? Not really. I mean, confetti. That's about it. And I'm going to take this and put it in a very official trash can when we back at the... here, lift your foot.
So, archive,
And you too.
length of archive reliability. The Library of Congress recently discovered that CDs and DVDs are really only good for 3 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And they start to degrade seriously, and they're panicking because they're losing a lot of music.
Yep.
So what kind of testing is being done on this kind of stuff for longevity of storage for archive?
Short answer is I don't know. I think we have a lot of experience with the error rate that you get with a corpus of tapes in a particular environment and how many times you read and write them where you get a good response. And so you've got a fairly normal distribution of errors out in the 5, 7, 10 year range, and you hope to get data off of it before you start getting high up. And you also, just like a RAID array, you defend yourself against instantaneous failures by keeping more data than you need. And for a lot of this sort of arrangement, you keep another copy of everything somewhere else. So you need your like 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000 or whatever bit errors on this tape and also on that tape simultaneously in order to run into a major problem. And for people that say, oh gosh, that risk is too high, well, you keep a third copy. And sooner or later you run out of nines.
Watch out for quantum entanglement.
Yeah. I mean, if you can bring the risk of it lower than, say, Meteor, then you should be done.
I know UF was really paranoid about security, so did you have to demagnetize that?
I'm excited. I'm going to take this to a very official trash can later on this evening.
I could read what's on it if I could be bothered to do that.
Technically.
I'm not going to.
Yep. Yeah, it's more and more challenging as time.
Melt it down into something.
No, it's going to be shredded.
Right.
That's what happens to.
As far as like, if you had this sort of stuff, you could probably do pretty neat things structurally with the material.
Possibly. It's not. It is strong. It is strong enough, but no stronger than that. That's the line that they keep on trying to thread, getting less and less material.
That's half the thermite reaction. Powdered aluminum.
Yep. Aluminum oxide.
Well, aluminum, and that's iron oxide.
Yep, the aluminum there.
That's some metal oxide.
Mhm.
And then put in some pure aluminum powder and a little heat, and it'll go away.
All right. Thanks for your time.